Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, cones and quitters of all ages, welcome back to the Ones Ready podcast. It's Aaron. Trent joined me on this podcast for an awesome discussion with our good friend from Valhalla Firearms Training, Nate. He's got a long last name. I think it's Cornacchia. I can never pronounce anybody's names correctly, so I try to get away from doing so, but I did so for you guys just because you know how it is. You know how it be. Go over to onesready.com. Make sure you're subscribed to everything that we're doing. Go check out the Instagram. Send us a DM if you need anything. Our YouTube channel is on and popping, as the kids would say, so make sure you're checking us out there too. The other thing that I want to bring your attention to is Nate is also a mass strength athlete. So go to modernathletestrength.com. Check out their Warfighter Elite, their fire programs, first responders, LEOs. If you just want to be in better shape, you want to be a better person for everything that you're trying to do in your life, whether you're just trying to live forever like me, or if you're trying to get ready for a special operations pipeline. Hey, is it the Army? Is it the Air Force? You're going to have a lot of information about the Air Force specifically on this one, because that's what we talked about for Nate's channel. But please go over to modernathletestrength.com. Check it out. Consider joining the team over there. We are on the team over there. It's everything from diet, nutrition, general physical preparedness to specific stuff that you're doing. It's great. It's awesome. Nate is a part of the team as well. So Nate basically came to us and said, hey, man, I get all these questions on Air Force special operations stuff. Would you guys be willing to come on and record a video and give us all the answers? Trent and I, of course, said yes. Peaches was busy being Santa today, which is a great thing. I hope you guys see the videos for that one. But we sat down with Nate and we had such a good conversation. We were like, hey, this is just great information about where we are as Air Force Special Warfare. It's got answers to all the questions that you could possibly need. And it gets our good friend Nate from Valhalla Firearms Training in front of our audience. So go over and check out his YouTube channel as well. We hope you like this episode. Without further ado, Nate, myself, Trent, we talk all things Air Force Special Warfare. Have a great one.
Gentlemen, welcome everyone. As you can see, I have on everyone's favorite Air Force nerds. Okay, I actually put out in my video yesterday that I was going to have the the most famous Air Force PJ, and let my comment section try to figure out who it was, and about 90% of them said Aaron Love.
No way. That's disgusting.
Swear to God, go look at the comments, brother.
I've never been more disgusted by anything. I apologize. I'm sorry. Nothing has ever been...
Hey, awesome. Pumped to have you guys on here. I've obviously been on your Ones Ready podcast. Stoked to have you guys come on the channel. Obviously, you'll put this out on your channel too. But we're going to do it in a reverse this time, and where I am going to be asking you guys about what it's like to be life in Air Force. And that's the first thing I want to talk about. Air Force SOF, Air Force SPECWAR, Air Force RSOF. It's like, or no, that's Army, right? What is it? AFSOF.
Yeah.
You guys have like 7 different names for your unit. So why don't we clear that up right away? Like what exactly is the umbrella of all these? Because you got like 8 different special operations units.
I got it. It's confusing. I'll start it off and then Trent can help, start it over. So Air Force Special Operations, right? That is the overarching term for everything. So the Air Force Special Operations and the Air Force Special Operations Command, that's the command. That's like saying AFSPECWAR or Army Special Forces, right? That is the overarching umbrella where everything fits underneath. That's all like 27 AFSCs, aircraft, mission, blah, 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 all that stuff, right? When you're talking about 4 career fields, Pararescue, Combat Control, Special Reconnaissance, and Tactical Air Control Party Airmen, those are the 4 enlisted career fields. They have officers. Those officers are not the same job. They're different career fields. They're special tactics officers, they're combat rescue officers, and then TAC-Ps have TAC-P officers or TAC-P officers or tacos, hilariously. So when we talk about that is what we refer to when we say AFSPECWAR. Now, there's a little bit of a wrinkle here where they include in the like development process. So Scout, Recruit, Develop is how you get into the Air Force. In the Scout, Recruit, Develop program, we include SEER, so Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape, and EOD as the 6th career field inside of that thing. But it's not part of the normal AFSOC architecture after that. So from ground up, when you go ahead and you're going to try to get into the Air Force, and we say you're in an AFSPECWAR career field, Air Force Special Warfare career field, they're referring to really those 4 enlisted career fields and their officer counterparts, and then SEER and EOD. When you get in to BMT, which is basic military training, you'll be in your own flight, and then you'll progress over to the AFSPECWAR training wing, and then it's only really those 4 career fields and their officer counterparts, and that's going to get us to Special Warfare assessment and selection. So when you hear AFSPECWAR or Air Force Special Operations or SEER is part of AFSPECWAR, but whatever, like there's a lot of flowing in and out of commands, and we'll talk about that for PJs, and you're going to ask questions on, how it is that we fit into the larger thing, but that's the bare bones of it. Trent, did I say anything wrong, or do you have something for clarification there?
No, I think it's pretty close. The Air Force Special Warfare was designed by the Air Education and Training Command because AFSOC does not train the folks that fall under the AFSOC umbrella, from the moment they walk in the door, like some of our sister service counterparts. And so like that, it was really just a branding thing so that people could understand kind of what all these people do and what we're trying to bring them into the Air Force to do. And then once we graduate from the pipelines, it's a lot different. And then I think the easiest way to understand it is like we're going to go in a lot of different directions, but like AFSOC is funded through SOCOM, but it doesn't mean that like only people in AFSOC do the types of things that these folks do for the Air Force and all over the place.
Right.
It gets real confusing because it's the Air Force.
And a history thing too, like just until recently, when did AFSPECWAR stand up? 2018? 2017?
Yeah.
17, 18. So until then, we were literally just under the Air Education and Training Command, which they train pilots and they train enlisted airmen to fly on aircraft, right? Like we didn't even have you went like one layer up, and it was somebody that had never been through selection, that wasn't a special operator, that didn't have elite skill sets. So we made AFSPECWAR, the AFSPECWAR architecture, to start training the folks that we're going to feed into AFSOC, right? It was a long time coming, but we're just younger and smaller as a comparative force, right? Like Pararescue's only been around since 66. We didn't really have an Air Force Special Operations Command until after 1981 and the Goldwater Nichols Act and all this other stuff, right? So we've had to kind of like orient to that, and we're super small. AFSOC is super duper small comparatively across the board. So we had to come up with our own command to train those folks, and that's why.
Yeah.
So.
And that's I think a good way to understand it, because from the Army side of things, like Army SOF is this like massive umbrella. Like think about all the units. It's like there's Delta Force, Army Special Forces, Ranger Battalion, Civil Affairs, PsyOps, and none of them are connected at all other than like the funding sits under RSOF. So it's interesting that you guys have like this actual umbrella. But I mean, I think it would also make sense of like, when we talk about it here, like how many Green Berets there are. If like you took Rangers, Green Berets, Civil Affairs, PsyOps, the numbers of that, and then compared it to AFSPECWAR, what we'd probably be like 100x.
Oh yeah,
I would assuming just from a personnel standpoint.
No, I think total there, 500 PJs. There's less than 500 active duty PJs, but actually like 60% of them are in the Guard. So when you talk about no kidding active duty PJs, there's like 200 PJs. There's 200 or 300 combat controllers. There's about 100 special reconnaissance dudes, and then TAC-P is a little bit bigger because they do provide service to the Army. But still, if you put all of those into a bucket, dude, it's less than like it's less than first bat. Like first bat is bigger than all of our ground operators. So
yeah, I mean, like first special forces group is pretty much as big as your entire unit. So with that, we talked a little bit about how you get into that initial pipeline. But what my first question is, because almost all the other SOF units outside of like the tier 1 units, right, have a sort of civilian to special operations pipeline. For us, it's 18 X-ray. For Rangers, it's the option 40 contract. I'm pretty sure the SEALs, like predominantly guys are coming off the street. Do you guys have a similar version of that? I mean, except for MARSOC. MARSOC's the one unit that like you have to have 3 years in the Marines. Do you guys have to, can you come straight off the street with some type of contract that says, obviously, not that you're going to be a PJ or a CCT, but you get the chance to try out to be one before you do anything else?
Yeah, that's actually the majority of the folks that come in for us. So I didn't know we were taking turns, Aaron. I was waiting on, for a second, and I was like,
I was waiting on you. I was like waiting for you to talk. Yeah, trying to do the mind meld thing. No, go ahead and just hit up SWOV and then the new guaranteed contracts.
Yeah, so we get the majority of our folks straight off the street. Actually, our retraining program is the more difficult way probably to get in, because it's just a little more complicated when you don't get as many people. But because it's so small, the numbers that are available for retraining are a little bit different. But yeah, we get the majority of people off the street. So that's why when we talk about the Scout Recruit Develop program, it's fairly robust for us. We're trying to get out there and educate people on these career fields just to get them in the front door. But then we have to get them up to their PT test, right? Like the problems with taking people off the street is they have no corporate knowledge of any of this stuff before they join. So this is why our podcast all exists, right? Is to get that corporate knowledge out, phase 0, so these people can have the knowledge that they need before they start training for this stuff. So vast majority in Pararescue, combat control, SR, and TAC-P. We used to bring them all in under a single umbrella. So it's kind of like an open-ended, you come in special warfare, open enlistment, whatever contract.
Special warfare operator enlistment vector is what they used to call it, or
that
SWOV.
was actually going to be my next question is, are all these separate selections, or do you start as like to get into AFSPEC warfare, that's your selection, and then you could branch from there?
Yeah. So it used to be back in my day, right? You could have a guaranteed contract. You'd say, I want to be a PJ. They'd write you a contract for PJ and they'd be like, you're going to INDOC, right? That's how I got in. And that's what we did. Then they moved, and this is pretty recently, 2015, 2016, to the Special Warfare Operator Enlistment Vector. And by the way, like back in the day, the selections used to be separate. Combat Control and Pararescue used to go to the same indoctrination course. And then Combat Control split off for reasons for a long time. And then PJs were just going through INDOC. And now to answer your question and then Tarantino it, everybody's going to the same selection now. So all 4 of those career fields, and again, we're not talking about SEER and EOD because we're after basic training, right? So now it's the 4 career fields and their officer counterparts all go to Special Warfare Assessment and Selection, or SWAS, if you want to call it that. We're working on the branding. It's a working title. But Special Warfare Assessment and Selection, it's one selection for everybody. Now, the SWOV program was a good idea, but they found after looking at the data for a couple years that putting everybody into one bucket and then letting everybody decide, that doesn't allow us to forecast out. Because we had a bunch of dudes that were like, I want to do this one career field and this one career field only. And they were like, all right, tight, but all the other career fields need people because we need to fill those career fields with people. It's more of a manning discussion, right? So now they've evolved that not only is there SWOV, so if you're still unsure as you're getting in, you're like, I want to be an Air Force Special Operator. You can, but I don't know which one I want to be. Right now, you can still go into that bucket and then just go through the development program, show up to selection, and then they give you guidance. They let you talk to people from different career fields. They tell you really what the career fields are about. They show you like cool videos, and they help guide you to the right career field job, right? That's still open. But also what you can do now is they're offering guaranteed contracts. So now it's going back to the way that it was, where you can go, hey, I want to be a combat controller. Like PJ is cool, but I want to go select specifically for combat control. And I'm going to go to Special Warfare Assessment Selection and hopefully get picked up specifically for
a picture
CCT.
of Copenhagen long cut. And that's where you mark it if you want to be combat control.
They're like, hey, can you look down at your chest and walk around? Okay.
Before we go any further, just that last part you said, when you get picked up. So when you go through the selection process, is it then basically needs of the Air Force of if you're going to be going to the PJ pipeline, the CCT pipeline, the SR pipeline, or are you as a student sort of in control of your own destiny of where you're going once you make it through that selection process?
Well, I'm assuming it's a fairly similar for the Green Berets. I don't know, like the better you perform, the more control you have. So if you're at the top of your class and you say, hey, I want to be a PJ, then you're going to be a PJ. If you're at the bottom of the class and you're like, hey, Mike, you put it on your list, right? Your wish list, my number 1 is PJ, my number 2 is whatever. And so, most people, I've never even heard of someone that got the number 3 on their list. Right. It's probably happened once, but usually they kind of all suss out the way that they're supposed to.
Yeah.
And it's like, you have great hair, you're going Pararescue. You
obviously
are, short and pudgy, you're going combat control, but
yeah, you have homosexual tendencies, you're definitely going to Pararescue. But that, we talk about it because it is a possibility, right? So when you're talking to these candidates or, these kids these days, they want to know absolutely everything. So they're like, so wait a second. So there's the possibility that I could go all the way through assessment selection, but somebody else, let's say everybody wanted to be a combat controller in that class, right? And let's say for whatever reason, we actually graduate more than about 20. So no kidding, Special Warfare Assessment Selection starts with anywhere from 115 to 150. And we rarely graduate more than 20. Like when you hear about a Special Warfare Assessment Selection class that graduates like 30 dudes, you're like, holy shit, that is huge, right? So let's say people always want to ask us the hypothetical. Well, I want to be a combat controller. What if everybody else picks combat controller? Are they going to tell me to do a different job? So technically, yes. But honestly, in the 5 years that Trent and I have been doing this, we talk to friends all the time. I don't know if that's ever happened. There have been people that got picked up. Like, I don't know if there's ever been a time where they're like, listen, needs of the Air Force. Listen, you can't be a PJ, dude. Do you want to be a combat controller instead, or vice versa, or whatever? You know what I mean? So yes, it's a possibility, and we want to be open and honest and transparent. But is it likely? No, it's much more likely that you're going to quit and you're not even going to make it through there. So don't worry about it.
Yeah, that's and that actually was going to lead us right into the next thing I was going to talk about when we're talking about selections. I always like to talk about, when I'm talking to SEALs or MARSOC or whoever, is the actual selection rates and pass rates, which is interesting to look at. So for us in Army Special Forces, one of my buddies is an instructor over there right now. I did a big deep dive with him on what that all looks like. And currently and this is actually on the super low end of what's traditional. We're at about like a 17 to a 20% pass rate. So of 100, and that's just selection. Right. Typically, when I went through, it was closer to probably like 30, 35%. So obviously that's way on the low end. That's to make it to the qualification course. But as far as I understand it, you guys actually have the lowest selection rates, or maybe that's all the way through the pipeline. I'm not sure from what I'm saying, but you could talk about that.
Yeah, well, I'll let Trent talk attrition rates, but something that I did want to hit too, and this is something for people to consider, like going into Air Force Special Warfare or AFSOC, or trying to be one of these ground operators in the Air Force that are kind of like unicorns in their own right. The admission standards to the Air Force are also the highest. So like folks that try to come over for like the medical requirements and trying to jump through the hoops of MHS Genesis and like trying to, the fitness test that we have is a little bit tougher than the entrance fitness exam for other folks. And it has a swimming component and some underwater components that really do kind of have more of a watershed, right? Like, if your ruck is really, really good, if you're solid on your body and you want to go to SFAS or you want to go to RASP, man, that's pretty good. That's easier to train for than being able to swim continuously for 500 meters and do 20-meter underwater. So those things are a little bit different as well. That's where we start like really cutting these numbers down. And that's why our number, not only because our force is so small, but because our entrance standards are very high and they typically don't give a lot of waivers for stuff. And we see this all the time on our Discord. We see this all the time in the DMs. They're like, listen, man, I had this one little thing in my medical history 10 years ago. It doesn't even affect me now. It was a one-off dumb thing a doctor wrote in there, and they're not going to let me in over it. Unfortunately, like we're trying to fix it. Like we literally, us, Trent, myself, Peaches, are no kidding, engaging everywhere we can to try to help fix this thing. But it just is what it is. Trent, I'll turn it over to attrition rates in the actual course from there.
Yeah, well, I think the selection course attrition rate varies, right? So when you break everything down and you're just talking about the selection course and not any of your preparatory courses, you're not talking about the rest of the pipeline, any of that stuff, we're probably sitting closer to 80%, historically.
Attrition rate, right?
Yeah.
20% success rate out of the special warfare assessment selection course, right?
Now, when you talk about like how many people walk in, like this is the same with probably all the pipelines though too, right? Like you talk about how many people walk in the front door to basic training versus how many people come out the other end with berets
and put a beret on.
You don't want to talk about what that number looks
that's like 5%. That's lower than 9%, I'll tell you for sure.
You talk about how many people walk into the recruiter's office that say that they want to do this job versus how many people put up a beret on at the end of it, and you're talking stupid numbers. But that's just the reality of the situation.
Good point, Trent. Caveat to what I said about special forces attrition rates. That's not including what you guys just mentioned, right? Basic training, airborne school.
Right.
I actually went to, because I was an 18 X-ray fresh off the street. We were in this, the way the Army was doing it at the time was doing entire basic training classes that were all 18 X-rays. So we had 180 18 X-rays in basic training. And I think by the time we got to SFAS, we had already lost like maybe 40%, 30% of the dudes. Yeah. So it's the same way. If you took it from like ground floor, then that's really rough. What I want to talk about next though, because I tell all the 18 X-rays this in the Army is what happens when you do this sort of civilian to AFSOC entrance and you fail, because in the Army, it's needs of the Army time. And what does that mean? Well, SWCC is 2 miles away from the 82nd Airborne, baby. So that's
a short bus ride,
reality.
baby.
The Army doesn't have to PCS you, right? They just have to transfer you unit. And so where does 99% of the dudes go? You go into the 82nd. Not that that's a bad gig, but a lot of these kids that are coming in thinking they're going to be Green Berets, they don't pass, and 90+% of them aren't going to pass.
Right.
And now you're headed over down the street to the 82nd Airborne. What happens? Is there like a because the SEALs used to have this like go SEAL or go home program where if you failed, you literally went back to civilian life.
Nice.
I imagine that's not the case. I would assume like the Air Force has got a job for you.
They do. Yeah. So there's a couple different ways that this can happen, right? If you're pre-accession, if you're scout, recruit, develop. Oh, I think Nate's gone. It's funny. I'll just answer this question. He'll hop back in. If you're in the scout, recruit, development program, you have to be in the delayed entry program, right? There's essentially a year that you can answer, or that you can. Hi, Nate. You're back. I'm mid-answer. You're good, big fat fingers. So, as you're going through the Scout Recruit Develop program, you could not qualify for the job if you never pass an IFT. You're not owed you didn't sign any contracts. You don't have to enlist, right? The watershed or that trigger is like, hey, you enlist for one of these career fields, you go to basic training, and then you show up across the street over the Chapman Training Annex, and you are into the AFSPECWAR pipeline, right? So from any shot there, if you quit or you get out, you're under whatever contract you signed up for 4 or 6 years. Right. If you don't make it, they're going to ask you to go do a different job. Now, there is a program for the officers where, as a civilian, you can actually go to what we're calling our phase 2 selection process, and civilians can go try out. And if they do well, if they get picked up out of there, they could be offered a contract. So it's right now it's only for officers. They're not doing it for enlisted folks. But basically what you can do is you can go, it's like going to the Guard, right? You can go try out for this specific job. And if they're like, okay, tight, you made it through selection, we'll give you a contract, and then you enter into a contract. But for everybody else, it's needs of the Air Force. The 2 biggest career fields in the United States Air Force are maintenance and security forces. And that makes sense. We have big bases. There's a lot of people.
The real SF. That's
the real SF, the infantry of the Air Force, if you will.
And of the Air Force.
Yeah, they're basically, the storied history of the 101st, all those dudes, Band of Brothers and all that stuff. That's basically about half as good as what security forces are. And they'll tell you, no, I'm kidding. All my SecFo bros. But so at that point, and that's failing to meet standards. That's disciplinary problems. That's you quitting. That's you deciding you want to do a different job. That's any number of things where you're unable to complete the training. The Air Force has a place for you. Like me, I failed out the first time. And I got a great job. I was an aerospace physiologist and then had to cross-train back in, become a PJ. So there's the possibility that you get a really cool job and it's not that bad. And, some people get out of those pipelines. They're like, hey, lesson learned. Turns out I didn't want to do that job anyway. And then they do great things in the Air Force, right? But yeah.
It's interesting how similar that is to the SF structure because, and what you're talking about with your officers with National Guard, we've already implemented that for enlisted. And so what you can do, and what I tell people now, because I don't wish I would have known because I made it through first time. But the reality is what you can do is you can get a National Guard 18 X-ray contract. What that allows you to do is go to basic training, go to airborne school, go to SFAS. And if you fail, you go back home to your National Guard unit. If you pass, you go to the qualification course. And at the end of that, you can make the decision if you want to go active and go to an active group. So it's kind of like the outs of like, if you fail, yes, you're in the National Guard, but you're not going to the 82nd. So that's like,
that's pretty dope.
And then if you pass, you can be like, oh, actually, I do want to be active duty. So
we don't have anything like that because we don't give a fuck. Yeah, we don't care. Just get in the Air Force, dork.
Just for your viewers, if any of them are interested in the Army side of things, that's what I always suggest is like, think about it a little bit, right? Because I signed a 6-year contract with my 18 X-ray contract. That's a long contract if you don't make it. But we do have, like you mentioned, tons of guys that are Green Berets did fail the qualification course first time. They go to the 82nd. They get usually it's a 1 year and you can return, come right back and try again. So with that, I want to jump into your actual qualification course because I think this is really interesting because you guys, especially PJs, and I joke about this, you guys have like all of the hardest classes, dive school, things like that we don't have in the qualification course. I don't think any other unit. Maybe MARSOC has
SEALs,
some of these.
So
but
MARSOC
SEALs,
is a little bit different, right? Because you're not taking dudes straight off the seat. SEALs, they did add free fall into their pipeline, but they still do something called SQT. So they still do their SEAL qualification time. And that's kind of comparative to what the combat controllers do. They do what's called STTS. So the Special Tactics Training School, or their Advanced Skills Training, or AST. After that, like to get them fully qualified, and we're getting into nerdy like skill levels and stuff. So I'll just say that, for Air Force Special Warfare pipelines, until combat control and special reconnaissance and special tactics officers recently removed dive school, and this is super recent, that you would get through the Special Warfare Assessment Selection course and pre-dive. Everybody was going to dive school. Everybody was going to jump school, airborne, free fall, everything, whatever, blah, 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 right? The combat controllers have decided for a couple of operational reasons, hey, we're going to take dive school out of the pipeline. It caused a lot of drama on our side of the fence.
Yeah.
A lot of drama.
will we talk about that later, maybe? Or because I would like to figure that out.
We can talk about it now. Like, I mean, we've been dealing with it forever. They've been trying to get it back. It's under congressional review right now. We do have a couple of people that are really close to the Air Force Special Warfare Pipelines. Anna Paulina Luna, the representative from Florida, she's actually really close to the community and has done a good job being our stalwart and our standard bearer to get it back into the pipeline for capability's sake. Trent was involved with a lot of the decision making. I'll just tell you straight as a dude, like, I don't agree with it.
Whoa,
I don't agree.
I did not.
So can I interject real quick? Just from the
Trent pulled it.
I did. Can I interject real quick? Just from a guy who's on a dive team in SF of why it doesn't make sense to me is because I had CCTs attached to my dive team my entire career operationally. Mm-hmm. I was a JTAC. Okay,
right? Yeah.
And guess who didn't drop any bombs? This fucking guy, because they don't trust me because I'm retarded. We get, even with me as a JTAC, we get a CCT attached to us who drops the actual bombs, right? So to me, that would mean, let's say I was doing something operationally on a Special Forces dive team, which I'm always going to have a CCT attached. Now he's not dive qualified. Right. Now I don't have that ability of your infill platform, and you're completely useless to me. So from my side of things that did this operationally and had CCTs attached to my dive team, it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense to us either. And obviously, like, there's all these bean counters and all these people, like, as we go through all of these iterations of what Air Force Special Warfare is going to be and getting away from the enabler mission and going to, you know, standardized teams that do a specific function for the Air Force and do all these other things and you know, global projection of power and all this other stuff, right? There are people, and again, we kind of talked about it in the training thing, but it doesn't take very long as you climb our ladder to get to somebody that doesn't wear a beret. To get to some pilot that's
what?
Bro, why did, still, we're run by pilots, bro. Like, we don't have, there's 5 commands that pararescuemen work in. If you work in AFSOC, like, it takes about 2 levels. You know, we have, how many stars do we have, Trent? We got 2 or 3 2-stars, and that's about it, right?
Yeah, max.
Yeah, so
wow.
It is a very short ladder climb to get to somebody that's a pilot that, and you know, not to berate them or say that they're stupid or not, because they're not, right? You don't necessarily have to wear a beret to be able to manage the forces. But when you start having these conversations, like, you understand inherently, you can't take that capability away because people on the ground need that capability. And people will be like, well, when was the last CCT dive mission? Oh, when was the last time CCT had to go in? Like, that's not the point, man. The point is that they can go on everything all the time. And when
here's the thing. Here's the thing, though, Aaron, is people can make that comment like, oh, when's the last time? Well, guess what? In 2018, when my dive team was deploying to Afghanistan, we put all of our fucking winter gear in a Connex to get ready to get shipped to North Korea because I was in 1st Special Forces Group, and we were going to be the lead plan element for diving in through the sea minefield to start that infiltration. And guess what we would have needed attached to us? A dive-qualified CCT. That was a real thing. Our Connexes were stored, ready to go. So just the fact that it hasn't happened doesn't mean that it's not something that is a serious possibility. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah. But people look at it and they try to project these numbers, and they've got a spreadsheet that has a red box on it that says this is how long it takes to make a CCT. And then they go, well, I mean, if we just took that part out, we'd get combat controllers to the forces faster. And then we can just kind of like figure it out on the back end. And you're like, that's not the way it works, man. Because now, you know, I'll button it up and let Trent talk here. But now we're playing the game of trying to get it back into the pipeline. But yeah, everybody else. So PJs, that it's never changed, and there's a couple different reasons there that I could talk about later. But PJs are going to dive school. All of the advanced schools, combat controllers are just not going to dive school. They're doing that after they get to their units. So they're running through a separate spin up and now it's on the units. Typically referred to, if you're a combat controller and you're going anywhere, like as your first assignment, typically you're going to a stateside unit, commonly referred to as the 2 series, 2-1, 2-2, 2-3, 2-6. Those are the 4 2 series STSs in America. So typically you're going to one of those 4 units. Now they are responsible for training them up, sending them to dive school, and getting them dive qualified after that initial pipeline. Trent, I'll turn it over to you for.
Which is a problem because we already talked about how small we are in comparison to like the Green Berets, right? Like if you're trying to find a bunch of Green Berets to make a dive team, like how many Green Berets at like 1st Special Forces Group do you have to choose from to be like, hey, we're going to pull you guys to go what you're doing right now. We're going to train you up for dive or volunteer or whatever.
Well, let me tell you how many there is. There's 9 dive teams in 1st Special Forces Group, and there's 7 groups. So
Jesus
that
Christ
tells you how many Green Berets there are you mentioned, to put together.
Yeah.
Right. So for us though, so like one of the things that people don't understand is we don't hold ground on the Air Force side. Like we do not have the logistical like machine behind us as enablers. Like there's not that many of us. Like it's really fun because we can like bop around and do, you know, be there for all the fun stuff with the Green Berets or the Rangers or the SEALs or whatever, and take credit for all the other stuff. But like you guys are the ones that have the machine with your giant units to do all of these other things. And people just don't understand. Like if you wait to pull one of our guys from our career field for pre-dive and then for dive school out of the team for like 6 months or whatever it takes, and then even if assuming that dude passes, right?
Right, yeah.
To be the one dive guy on that team in case somebody needs a dive qualified guy, which people need on a fairly regular basis. Like logistically, it just doesn't make any sense. So everybody's always looking at our pipeline and being like, well, the Green Berets don't have dive in their pipeline and they're doing just fine and they have dive teams. It's like you're talking about a completely different animal, and people don't understand it. And it's not that the pilots are stupid, like Aaron said. They just don't understand it. And people outside of the training command have no idea what they're talking about, and they make these decisions. And then there's the historical piece, which is messy, but yeah, it just doesn't make sense to do it on the back end for us the way that it would make sense for a much larger organization to be able to pull the talent out later for that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, Aaron. Just to button it up and to get back to the question, like, yes, all of our schools are front loaded, and they're front loaded because when we graduate somebody, when we put that beret on their head and we send them out into the world, the historical assumption about that dude is he's ready to go to war right now. Like you need the minimum amount of, as a pararescueman, when you graduate what we call our apprentice course, you guys call it the Q course. When you graduate the Pararescue Combat Rescue Officer Apprentice course as a 3 level, the going in is that, yeah, you're an apprentice. You're probably the best thing that you can really be is a primary medic, right? Like you've got some other skills, but you have everything that you need to actually go do the job 3 to 6 months. Like we have people deploy right away out of those schools, right? That's the going in assumption about Air Force Special Warfare. So that's the historical piece that Trent is talking about too, is like for so long, we're like, no, man, you get through this 2-year pipeline and it's not 2 years plus another 1.5 years of school. It's 2 years and then you can go to combat. Like that's what we've done our entire, history. And that's why people have such an issue with combat controllers taking that away. Because now they're like, well, no, I can't go dive with this dive team now. I got to go back to dive school. I got to spend 2 months training and 6 months at school and come back and like all this other stuff. It's going to take me 7 months to get all the way through to be, what we were doing with guys in the pipeline. So there you go.
With one question about CCTs, because that's who I worked with. When talking about Air Force, we always had CCTs attached to us, which was great because it was always a punching bag, right? Verbal punching bag. It was always right. So that was, especially if you're like if you're a new guy on a ODA and you got a CCT attached, it's like awesome because like all that hate just immediately gets diverted to the Air Force,
because it's an Air Force guy. 100%. Yeah, you could be like, oh, look at this fucking dork.
Yeah, but what was interesting when I went to JTAC school or SOTAC, right? We go to SOTAC because Special Operations. For those of you who don't know, like JTAC, the guy who drops the bomb, it's the generic name. But in Special Operations, we have to have a cool guy name for it. So it's a SOTAC. But what was interesting when I went to SOTAC, and I was kind of confused when I first got there, is we had like 7 CCTs in the class that were already CCTs. And it was kind of like, wait, because up until I went to SOTAC and talked to those guys, I thought that was their job. Like a CCT's job is to like come drop the bombs because that's all you've ever done. And then like the guys there were like, yeah, man, this is like a secondary school for us.
CCT's primary mission is airfield seizure, is making an airfield where an airfield previously didn't exist to control aircraft to get in. That's why the career field motto for combat control is first there, literally meaning they will show up somewhere that the airhead did not exist, establish an airfield, make an airport out of nothing except for them and a radio, and then bring in follow-on forces and establish that airfield. And then in Air Force-ism, like you turn that over to somebody else, right? Like the CCT's job is to get there. JTAC, they made their money off of JTAC in GWAT because they already knew they were that air-to-ground liaison. They already knew how to talk to the aircraft. They already had this small contingent of folks that were JTAC qualified. And then when you look at guys like Chief Will Markham, rest in peace, Alan Yoshida, these guys that went in with the initial push to Afghanistan and absolutely leveled Bagram Airfield and killed thousands of people. People were like, holy shit, CCTs or JTACs, get me one of those. And the CCT career field, to their credit, was like, yep, we're all JTACs. And they just started throwing everybody at JTAC, right? But now as everybody, GWAT's over, we're kind of retreating back to home base, right? Special Forces is going back to FID, Foreign Internal Defense and SFAB. Air Force is going back to like, hey, we fix Air Force centric problems. And one of those is combat controllers going back to that airfield seizure, airfield control mission set. But that's actually their primary mission.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Last thing I wanted to talk about with your guys' qualification course is, do you guys, because again, CCTs, PJs, you're getting attached to SF units, Ranger Bat units, whatever, which means like my CCT was a dude at the back of the stack, which did. And so I went through an obscene amount of combat training and all these things, right? Urban combat, CQB. Do you guys have that in your pipeline? Because one of the things I never really thought about at the time was, and I remember, I don't know if I told you this story before, Aaron. I don't want to get into the big story about my near ambush that I was in, but I do remember at one point we're taking PKM fire out of a doorway in an open field, right? And I'm like, oh fuck, away from the door as these rounds are flying by, and I look to my right, and my CCT is on an iPad, standing in the middle of the field like this on the radio.
Totally fine.
We got an AC-130, and I like have to grab him, and multiple times in the deployment this happened. Throw him out of the way, like, dude, you're gonna get shot in the fucking face.
He doesn't care. So that's what he's there to do. He's there to call in that fire, dog.
and he did, right?
Yeah.
But it kind of made me realize at that moment, like, has this dude ever had any fucking tactical training before? So that was the question I wanted to ask you guys. Is like, is that part of your pipeline? Do you have any like tactical based courses or training?
So there's like 4 different courses that everybody goes to, and we tried to fix this problem a bunch of times. So like the Pararescue guys actually, I think, have the most CQB training.
We do
in their 3-level pipeline. Their pipeline is the longest, but like combat controllers have their own, finishing school, their own 3-level course. PJs have theirs, we have ours, and then the TAC-Ps have theirs as well. And so there's like a mixed bag of what they get. And then also when you go to STCS, you pick up a little bit of it for the combat control SR side. And then whatever you pick up on your pre-deployment training, assuming you get any pre-deployment training, and if you're in the middle of GWAT, a lot of times it was like, hey, new guy, like, you seem talented. You go to SOTAC, you show back up with your rating, we're out the door. This is your team. Ready, set, go. Good luck.
Yeah. Speaking specifically about the Pararescue pipeline, like in Pararescue, you've got like a tactics block and your FTX block, and it's all, dude, it's battle drills 1 through 5 heavy. Yeah. Like you were literally just, it's, guys there can spit out the troop leading procedures. Guys there know the Ranger handbook like the back of their hand. We trained to the SOFBIS, the Special Operations Forces baseline interoperability standards. Oh, damn, that was good, Trent. That feel good to you? It felt nice. Yeah, right away. But we trained to all those standards as well, right? Like, I'm not here to say, like, when you talk about, Shipley, what's his first name? Dan Shipley? The SEAL?
DJ? Which one?
Yeah, DJ Shipley. He was
DJ's,
on a
DJ's the son, yeah.
Yeah, he just had a reel where he was like, I'll tell you what, those 2-4 dudes, the tier 1, operators out at the Air Force, those guys are great at CQB. Like those guys really are. But that foundation is laid in our pipeline, right? So when you have a pararescueman or a combat controller attached to your unit, we know exactly enough how to get in your stack, not get in your way, do exactly what we need to do for tactical stuff. But it's always with that mindset of like, hey, this isn't my job. You know what I mean? Anytime that I've ever worked with a special forces team, the 18 Delta would be like, hey, you're the medic now. And I'm like, not really, homie. You're going to keep the M9 bag. You know what I mean? Like I'm here for different shit. But, I'm not here to tell you that I'm better at CQC than a Ranger. That's not true. Right. Like I know, like we have a ton of follow-on training. There's a ton of training that happens afterwards. In the pipeline, you're getting a baseline skill set. The shoot house, I'll tell you what, at Albuquerque, down at Kirtland Air Force Base, there is a world-class movable wall, sim shoot house, complete with video. Like we put the students through the ringer, and and that's even outside of like school. Like dudes get in there, and students that aren't even in courses that are just doing like casual work. Every once in a while, an instructor will be like, hey, U10, you guys want to learn how to enter a corner fed room? And they're like, fuck yeah, we do. So you go through it. So, but it's also, it's completely person dependent. Some people, are going to have, like, I've seen PJs that are just like, yeah, CQC, I'm just going to be standing at the breach anyway. So if you need me, call me in.
Right. Yeah.
I'll be, you know what I mean? Like
I'll be at the CCP, boys.
Exactly. Hey, the CCP's over here. You can see it's a covert chem lights. But the team that I was on when I went to the 321st, my first team was at the 321st STS. Our primary job was attaching to what used to be the SIF teams. So it used to be the Commanders and Extremist Force and then the Commanders Response Force. So it was the direct action special forces teams.
Mm-hmm.
That was our whole job. So, bro, like we had a standard where like you better be the best shot. Like I don't care what you do, but when you go over to Germany and they take you out on that range for the first day, you better be top 3 shooter. You better be top 3 in PT. And when they put you in the house, they had this ridiculous like 4-story shoot house. It was insane. They were like, hey, when you go, and it was live fire. They were like, when you go through that, man, you better not throw a single round. You better be dope at CQC. So it's unit dependent, it's mission dependent, but there is a baseline inside of the pipeline for all 4.
Yeah, especially during GWAT. Sorry,
Trent, go ahead.
Nope, when we're going down the list of deployments, right? Like when we're like, hey, like we got to put a guy, a combat controller, and a gray hat, wherever we're doing, right? Like, and you know which bases are the hottest, right? Obviously, we're going to try to put guys with a couple rotations or a rotation or 2 in the train ups, the all the other skill sets where we think that the most shit is going to go down. But that's not always how it works, right? So it's like sometimes you get a guy straight out of the pipeline that shows up on your team, and it's like for one reason or another, this is the location that's going to take the most fire, that's going to get into the most crap. This ODA, for some reason, just feels like going out and kicking all the hornets' nests. And for some reason,
I got a story
during
for
this 6 months, right? Like during this 6 months, that's when it kicks off. And everybody's like, what happened down there? Like that used to be the fun spot to go. This used to be the place where we'd send guys for a rotation to like take a break. And all of a sudden, it's not that way anymore.
I got to tell you guys this. You're going to love this story. So this is the very first. So we had, because the way it worked, like our rotational schedule for like the CCTs was like 2 months offset to the ODAs. Mm-hmm. So you would have like one of your CCTs for 4 months, and then like a new CCT would roll in. And EOD worked the same way too. Like none of the schedules worked right. But when we first got there, our CCT, I won't say any names because you guys, I'm sure, know him because we'll talk offline. Great dude. Great. But
all right. Good dude. Good dude. Almost killed us. Almost killed. Yeah. You put a good dude on it.
So anyway, very first mission, right? And of our deployment. And he's on his very first combat rotation. And our team has like the premier mission in southern Afghanistan. Like we got into all the
like Helmand or like Herat?
No, so we were based out of Kandahar, but we were working all the way through Aruzgan and Kazakh-Aruzgan, so up through like TK into nasty shit, dude.
Fuck Eric fuck that.
Yeah, real nasty shit. Right? Anyway, our very first mission that we go on, okay, we have the 160th, which is like for SF, sometimes like you're not always getting the 160th, right? Because we're not a tier 1 unit.
Sure.
And so the 160th like decides who they're going to fly. Anyway, they want to fly us into this mission because they're going to a really fucked up area, and they love to do that shit. So. Very first mission, our CCT, it's his first mission with our ODA, okay? We infill on the 160th, and we're doing an offset. So we have 2 Chinooks, and the way it was for manning, one of the Chinooks let half of the element off and then had to pick up, move about 1.5 kilometers away, and land and let the other half off. Okay?
Sure.
So the first element lands with the GFC, the team sergeant, all of them, okay? That's like the half that gets off. They get off, aircraft picks up, comes over, lands. When it lands, I get off. Yeah, I don't remember exactly how it happened. We're on the ground, and I just hear now everybody's on the ground. Helicopters are gone. We just hear over the radio from our GFC, "Hey, where's our fucking CCT?" And everybody's like,
he better be right. If the commander's asking that, it means he ain't in the right spot.
Well, he's not with the GFC, right?
That's not where the CCT is supposed to be.
So what happens, okay, is like the helicopter that landed with the GFC, everybody jumps off. Our CCT can't figure out how to get unattached from the radio. And so he's going like this, fucking with it. And you know the 160th, bro, like
nope, dude,
you're off. The second that last boot is off, like they're fucking gone.
You're
so
done.
He's fucking with it.
Oh my god!
The aircraft
just to the 160th. Like I have no kidding. Like the first time that I worked with the 160th, they were like, "Hey, this is gonna be a pretty quick tactical offload, so make sure your shit's tight." I'm like, "Yeah, okay, cool." I literally remember like the second that we kind of like get into that hover and I feel the tail wheel touch the ground, my tie-in's off. I naturally hit the ground, like my boots hit the ground, and I felt the aircraft brush my ruck as it took off. And I was like, holy shit, they were not like usually with the Air Force, it's like you get out, you take a knee, you're still inside the rotor disc, but the Air Force pilots are like, yeah, give us not the 160 though. That dude almost I like bumped my ruck up and I was like, oh my God.
So, and the 160th lands us on target. So when I get off the Chinook and I look up, like the first building's 10 meters from me.
Oh, good.
Right? So, yeah. And so you're already, and there's like murder holes everywhere. It's like fucking like 2000 BC fucking Aruzgan, just like the sketchiest fucking place you've ever seen. And I just, as somebody says, you know, GFC's like, where the fuck's the CCT? And I just hear behind me, guys, not over the radio, but like, right, like I hear him behind me, and I like look behind me, and our CCT is standing there, and he's like, I didn't get out of the helicopter fast enough. And then we're like, we have the CCT a click and a half away of like, and so my senior Delta is like, who's got like 5 combat rotations at this point. It's like, oh fuck, god damn it, I'll fucking walk him over there. Grabs like 2 Afghans, grabs him, literally just like walks a click across like all these fucking murder holes to like drop our CCT off with the GFC like a little baby. Like, here's the fucking retard.
And then he's just like standing there on the radio like, oh, cool file.
But so that was our and I wanted to tell that story because like Trent talked about, like sometimes a guy's like brand new and just gets sent to like the hottest mission. Like that's what happened to him, which was he ended up doing well, you know, eventually. But then we got backfilled with that 2-month left mark with one of the CCTs who had like 7 combat deployments, and we were just like, oh, okay, there's a little bit of a difference here about like how these things look.
It highlights the difference in the Air Force too. Like we are going to put you in that position much younger, much greener, much more fresh. Like it's literally like sink or swim, you know, pun intended, as we do the same thing with pararescuemen. You know, I was on we were the last rescue team on alert at Bastion in like 2000, like winter of 2012. Like when we were getting ready to go out of that place, like we were breaking tents down, and like we were the last team that was on. During that rotation, they took an HPED, a houseborn IED, down in Helmand somewhere, and a 23-year-old senior airman, pararescueman, was the guy that handled that mass casualty event on his first combat.
Wow.
Like we're going to put, like, the music is going to stop. That's what people don't understand. Like the enabler mission sounds cool, right? Like when we're talking about Air Force and Army, like working with the Army and working with the Navy, like that's all cool until you realize like what you're there to do is that a grown man with 7 combat deployments, the world's going to blow up, the mission, the music is going to stop, and that man is going to look at you as a 23-year-old fresh out of the pipeline 4 months after you got your beret on your first combat deployment, and they're going to go, I need you to save us. Like that, as a pararescueman, as a combat controller, as a special reconnaissance man, as a TAC-P, they are literally going to look at you and they're like, if you do not engage, we are going to die.
Aaron, let me tell you how true that is. The same CCT I'm just talking about, 2 missions later, so this is his third combat mission, we get in that near ambush. And he had to drop danger close from an AC-130 to basically save us from about 40 meters. And it was that same thing. It's like, dude, we are literally in a near ambush in an open field with 10 Taliban insurgents inside of a DFP. We are going to die if you don't pull this off, which he did. And that was the first of 2 different near ambushes, multiple medevacs. We ended up getting emergency medevac out of our whole ODA. We didn't even make it to the target. We took so many casualties.
Oh my
and
God.
That dude, in his 3rd combat mission, was responsible for all of that in the air. And you think about how crazy that is to be in charge of something like that with that fresh. Like you would never be really in that position as a Green Beret because you've got 12 other Green Berets. So when I'm a brand new dude, like my scope of responsibility is like, hey, make sure the Afghan like doesn't fucking shoot the other Afghan in the back as they're like walking up to the house. Like that's like I'm babysitting.
Yep.
But for you guys, like the responsibility, especially for those CCTs, is so massive.
Yeah.
It's funny. You show up at the FOB and all the Green Berets are making fun of you, Air Force jokes, blah, blah, blah. A week and a half later, everything blows up and they look at you.
Yep.
And you're like, oh yeah. Oh yeah, let's do this.
Yep.
But
so with that, we're talking about new guys. I wanted to ask you guys what is life like for a new guy when they enter the unit? Because I can tell you as an SF guy, life is real rough for about your first year and a half. I don't know if you guys...
Teams are teams, dog. It's the same. It's the same thing. It's, you know, there's a running joke. You know, I have friends that are still at the Pararescue schoolhouse. Like we know we get invited to go to graduations. We see when these folks graduate, and we say the same thing to every single student. Congratulations. Take 24 hours to be proud of yourself, and then you're going to go back to being a cherry piece of shit. Because that's what you are. When you get to the team, you know just enough to be really dangerous to the rest of your team. So what do? You shut the fuck up and you take the trash out. That's what you do. You know, the teams are the teams of the teams. And we have there's a ton of like really awesome, really cool traditions that we do for new guys at the unit. You know, one of the teams at the 2-2 I loved, they had a Viking motif. You know, you have to pick a motif for your team. It's going to be like Vikings or samurais or Spartans or sheepdogs or whatever. So they were Vikings. But every morning when the work day would start, you had PT from 7 to 9. And then at 9 o'clock in the hallway, he would blow this Viking horn. And it was like the start to work. And then at the end, he'd have to blow it at the end of the day too, to signal that their troop was done training for the day. So, man, we bring you into the fold, but it's go time. I'll tell you, as a new guy, you know, it's all cool to talk about having all these schools, right? It's cool to talk about, oh, you're a diver. That's tight. You're a free fall guy. Oh, okay, cool. Man, the first time that you show up to one of those events and somebody looks at you and goes, man, I'm not dressing you. You need to put on your fucking parachute and come get a JMPI when you're ready. Oh, by the way, you're doing 2 jumps and then we're going directly into night with equipment on. So get your shit together and you better not be backsliding into anybody. You're like, oh, hold on. Where's the adult? And they're like, congratulations, you're the adult now. So there you go.
Yeah, man. And it's definitely like that on the SF teams. I think for us, I think we're a little bit more brutal about, like, you can get kicked off a team and like so fast as a new guy, but we also have the luxury of having, now we're undermanned like from where we should be, but we kind of have the luxury of like, hey, if this new dude's a piece of shit, like fucking he's gone. Like we're not going to deal with him at all. I wonder, like, for you guys having such a low manning, are you sort of like forced to sort of like remedially try to upkeep these dudes? Or does your pipeline do a better job of maybe not letting some of these guys because for us, like, there's a lot of dudes that get through the pipeline, they get to a team, and like the qualification course and ODA life is very, very different in the level of performance. If you guys, I'm sure you guys understand what I mean by that.
Well, there's a difference between qualified as like a Green Beret or Pararescue special reconnaissance versus being a Green Beret. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the big difference, right? Because these guys show up and Aaron was like, oh, like I'm a diver. It's like, you are not you are dive qualified. You are free fall qualified. Like, that's a totally different thing than being one of these things.
You've got 23 jumps, bud. Relax.
Yeah. There's nothing more terrifying than a new guy coming out on the stick with you, and you're just like, keep that dude away from me.
Yep. And I will say the pipelines do a great job because, you know, because of those schools, like, you're constantly evaluated. Like, those skills, like, you can fail out of the Pararescue apprentice course for being a bad free fall parachutist. Like, you know, we evaluate you after like when you're qualified as a free fall guy at the Pararescue apprentice course. Like, we have what we call the final evaluation phase. It's 14 days of multiple missions a day. They include jump missions. There's no dive missions right now, but they include tactical missions. If you sweep somebody with your rifle walking in the door, and I think that's a safety violation, I will kick you out of that course at the end of a 2-year pipeline. Like, that is the level that we evaluate people. So to answer your question directly, like, as a new guy, you know, there are multiple levels of crucible that you pass. It's not just, oh, you graduated free fall school tight, you haven't done it again. Oh, you graduated dive school tight, you haven't done it again. Man, they're diving in an AST. They're doing waterborne operations. You're doing, you know, we're working on helicopters. Like, we do half infills. There's water work in the apprentice course where they do these things, right? So you're evaluated over and over and over again. It's not just out of the school. So the new guy, I mean, again, the new guys there, they may only have like 2 or 3 FTXs where you're doing a free fall mission, but the students know, like, if you're unsafe, if I watch you go out at the apprentice course, like, if I watch you, we've had guys leave on red light before. Like, guys get like the standby, and like, no kidding, a dude just literally left
later.
There's a very distinct sound as you're a jump master on the ramp of a C-130. You don't have to hear it, or you don't have to see it go on. There's a very distinct sound of that jumper leaving that ramp. Like, you can just hear it. The air sounds differently. Even in your helmet and shit, you could hear a jumper leave.
Yeah, there's a whoosh. There's a whoosh to it. You know what I mean?
There is. Yep. Well, and I'll tell you what, when that light's red and when you didn't tell anybody to go and you hear that whoosh behind you and you turn around, literally, like, the funniest thing, like, the two jump masters turned around and looked at each other and literally were just like, well, hope he doesn't fucking die. And you're looking out like, oh my God, what'd you do? But like, if you do that, like, we'll kick you out. Like, imagine being in the pipeline and you graduated free fall school already. You know, imagine being so unstable in the air. Like, I've removed people from our pipeline for being unstable or from doing dangerous things in the air. You know, so for us, it's a little bit different. Like, those things are constantly laid on. You're constantly evaluated all the way through our qualification courses, or what we our apprentice courses is what we call them.
Well, and I want to ask in the Green Beret like pipeline, so to speak, like what are the numbers like? Because like we have really small numbers, so you get a lot of really individual attention. You know, like in the beginning of our pipeline, it's not that much time before there's like 20 students and like 3 instructors. You know, like you cannot get away with you're not part of a group anymore. Like you're just the dude getting screamed at by the cadre every single day. And so I'm curious as to how that plays out in the Green Beret like pipeline experience, and how often you feel like you are an individual that like they see every single thing you do.
It's and I actually literally was thinking about this as you were talking about how much different it is than for you guys, because when I'm at SUT, there's like 130 dudes in my class. Okay, so that's our Ranger school. There's 130 Green Berets. I'm in a platoon. Well, technically, I'm in a squad, right? Like it's structured just like an infantry unit. Okay, but there's like 40 dudes in my platoon in my SUT class. My squad has like 17 guys on it. So when we're doing our like Ranger school operation, there's like 16 other dudes. So I might be in you are put in like leadership positions, like, hey, somebody's the team leader, somebody's the Alpha team leader, Bravo team leader, the Weasel, whatever, to where you're like being evaluated sort of individually at times. But like there's a lot of dudes that like slip through the cracks in the qualification course because everything is so team oriented, right?
Yeah.
Where selection, what's SFAS? Yes, there's some individual events in the first like week in land nav, but what's the big culminating exercise? You're on a 16-person team and you have one cadre there monitoring all that. So like you talk about gray man, it's very advantageous in the qualification course to be not necessarily like the ultimate gray man that's like so quiet that the cadre is like, what's wrong with this autistic dude, right?
This guy's on the spectrum.
This one's more autistic than the rest of them.
But like just enough gray man to where like you work hard, but you don't say a whole lot. Like you can go a long way in the qualification course. And even like you think about the 18 Echo course, there's 50 dudes in my class, 2 instructors. Jeez. Robin Sage, I'm on an ODA. Right. And I've got 2 instructors. I've got 16 dudes. So the entire qualification course, while there are like moments interlaid where they're going to test your leadership ability in a leadership position. Like, and you can guys can get away with that, right? Like I did really good while I was the Alpha team leader on a mission, right? Like that's not necessarily a representation of like my ability over the long term. So we do, I mean, and not to, shit on my own organization, but there's a lot of fucking shitbag SF dudes. Like not comparative, like not like 30%, but there's like one
more than you want.
More than
like because of that, like there's just a lot of dudes that slide by. So I think
you're not gonna get that in the Air Force. That final evaluation phase that I was just talking about as a PJ student, you were gonna get like no less than like 5 out of those like 14 or 15 straight days of missions. You're gonna get like 5 individual evaluations. Where no kidding, a one-on-one instructor is gonna be over your shoulder, and he's gonna be watching you do medicine. And then the next mission, they're like, hey, what'd you get evaluated on last time? Oh, you were patient care. Okay, well this time it's employment. So they're going to be right next to you on the helicopter. And if you do something wrong, or if you can't get off that helicopter, or if you leave a piece of equipment, like you could fail. Like you're getting evaluated, and it's like that the entire pipeline. Like
I would say, maybe like 4 or 5 times in your whole qualification course are you put in a position like that.
Oh yeah, no,
2 years.
I mean, bro, no, you'll get 4 or 5 of those evaluations in each phase of there's 7 phases in the Pararescue apprentice course, and it's everything from tech rescue to tactics to aerial employment, which includes helicopters and jumping. I mean, your tactics phase, like again, like if you employ a weapon in a way that is weird or dangerous or whatever, you're out. Like during our weapons phase on the range, like we have some of the best weapons instructors in the world teaching these guys. And if you can't make that standard, which are again the SOCOM standards, or if you do something unsafe on the range, they'll be like, yeah, tight. Anyway, you're fucking gone. And that happens quite frequently.
Yeah, that's probably like the difference of why I explained like so many dudes get kicked off teams so fast early is you got like these dudes that slip through the cracks in that 140 person class the whole way through the Q course. Then they get to an ODA and they get put under a senior, and that senior, if within the first week, is like to the team start, this dude's a piece of shit, dude. Like how the fuck did he make it through? So because you can't hide, you guys know, like once you're operational on a team, like there's no fucking hiding you being you know, like negligent or you being like bad at your job. Like everyone knows immediately if you're not up to snuff. So
that has like I'm not going to say that that's never happened. Like I've got 2 people in mind right now. I'm not going to put their names out there, but there has definitely been time, because again, we have a standard, and the standard is a 70% standard. Okay. We're not asking you to be, you know, silver star winner David Yo-Yo Keaton after you get out of the pipeline. We're not asking you to be the world's best pararescueman or best special operator or best combat controller. We're not asking you to be Peaches fresh out of the pipeline. Right. But there are definitely some dudes that, like, you know, refired every single thing that they ever did, barely went by. You know, I've been in the instructor room, and I've had line instructors look at me and go, Aaron, you got to kick this guy the fuck out of the pipeline. I'm like, listen, I know, but we can't. He's not failing anything. Like, we don't like him. We know he's not the right person, but we don't have, like, the standard is a standard, man. If he's passing the standard, there's not a lot that we can do. And there's been a couple times where those dudes get to team, and I've gotten at least one angry phone call in my career. Like, what are you giving? You know, somebody called down in the schoolhouse, was like, bro, what is up with this dude? He's fucking terrible. And I had to just look at him and be like, listen, man, you guys are going to need to spend a lot of time training this guy. He barely passed. He refired everything. I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, we were unable to kick him out. We know what he is and who he is, we think. So it happens everywhere.
Yeah.
So, the individual's attitude, their attitude is going to dictate a lot of that as well, right? Like, because we've all seen guys come out of the pipeline that like mess up a couple things, and they get all defensive, and they're not the guy taking out the trash every day and all this other stuff, and that just builds on itself. Like, there's no one's saying that when you get on team, like, we're going to kind of force you into mistakes, because we're going to put a lot of pressure on you. We're going to throw you into situations to see how you handle it. And just because, like, you go to your first CQC school and you make some mistakes doesn't mean we're kicking you off team. As long as you have the correct attitude about it, like, there's always redemption available, right? Like, just like that controller that got off on the wrong helicopter, right? Like, it's not the end of the world. It's, you're going to make fun of that dude until he saves all your lives and calls in danger close. And then still the next day, you're still going to make fun of him for the thing that he did, you know, in his first mission.
Yeah, the whole deployment.
For the rest of his life. But like the attitude of these folks coming out is really the big thing. And what helps us a lot too is most of these guys sign up for 4 years. By the time you get on team, if you're still on a 4-year contract, like, we just wait for you to not re-enlist, because it's going to become real obvious that.
So that's an interesting thing we could talk about is, there's no like forced re-enlistment to put your beret on. So for us, when you get to the end of the qualification course, because it can take forever, right? Like, if you get some recycles, if you're an 18 Delta, I know an 18 Delta who spent 5 years in the qualification course.
Yeah, the 5-year program. Yeah.
Oh god.
Yeah. I mean, 3 years is like baseline for 18 Deltas, right? So, but if you get some recycles, but for us, like, when I go to graduate, they're like, hey, if you don't got 36 months left on your contract, you will re-enlist or you will not be a Green Beret.
Yeah.
Is that different for you guys?
I mean, sometimes it can be if it takes a long time to get through. Trent, go ahead.
On the combat control SR side, we have an STS co-located with like our upgrade school, the STTS. And if you don't pick up another enlistment, you just go across the street to the 2-3 and just basically wait until you're out. You know, because there's always a few of those. Not always, but like that's not a typical story, but it's not that uncommon either.
Yeah. And a lot of our guys, honestly, they get out and they re-enlist on their own for a couple different reasons. You know what I mean? Like, the 4-year enlistees, you know, you're wanting that first deployment. You're wanting that time. Like, usually there's enough time, because we have the same rules in the Air Force. It's like, you need, 36 months of retainability in order to take another assignment or whatever. We have those rules as well from the personnel side of it. But usually with our dudes, like, it's pretty rare actually to see a first term assignment dude not re-enlist. It's pretty rare to see a guy get through the pipe. Yeah. To get through the pipeline and then go to their first unit. I mean, in my entire, 22 years, I think I can only remember like 1 or 2 times a guy got out of the pipeline, got to his unit for a little bit, and was like, man, I'm out. I'm going to go ahead. Like, even those guys that didn't get a deployment right away.
Wow.
Those guys, that almost drove them to re-enlist, because they're like, I didn't get the deployment that I wanted this one. I'm going to re-enlist one more time for 4 years. And then I'm going to figure it out. Usually where we see dudes drop off is like that 10-year mark.
That is the complete opposite. I mean, like, polar opposite to what it is in group. The vast majority of our guys, especially 18 X-rays, do their 3 years on a team, and for whatever reason are like, fuck this isn't for me, and get out. If you hit the 10-year mark, like, nobody gets out, dude.
Yeah.
Like, for whatever reason, and a lot of it is like bad experience, right? Let's say you're a new dude, because there's good ODAs and there's really fucking bad ODAs.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Leadership is a big part of that. We all know that, right? You put a shitty leader in charge of a team, that team's going to be fucking garbage. If you're a brand new dude who comes out of the qualification course and goes to a shitty team with a shitty senior and a shitty team sergeant, treats you like shit, makes you work till 6 o'clock every night for no reason.
Oh yeah.
Right? That, because he doesn't want to go home because he fucking hates his wife, right?
He hates his life, right? Yeah, standard.
That's a thing, right? We all know that. Like those dudes, and I know a couple of my buddies that were like great dudes who were like, fuck this, SF's the worst thing ever. Whereas if you like the complete opposite, you get on a good ODA, like I was fortunate to be on amazing ODAs, like you're like, awesome life. So really interesting. Next thing I wanted to get into is how you guys actually operate. We mentioned a little bit about how you get attached to ODAs or you get attached to Ranger Battalion. For CCTs, it makes sense. Like I think as a JTAC, right, that's an asset. This is more for maybe you guys on the SR and the PJ side of the house, which I really don't know because, again, it was very, very rare in SF where, like, we needed a PJ because we're, like, the one rare exception to where we have 18 Deltas. Like, none of the other soft units really have a medically trained person like a PJ or an 18 Delta. So for us, like, we could always use a CCT, but, like, a PJ was, like, pretty rare for me to ever see. So, like, how do you guys actually, like, get integrated, like, let's say from an operational or a combat realm as a PJ? Because, you know, the running joke, which, you know, is like all that training and never leave the wire, right?
Come sit and relax, baby. That's what CSAR stands for.
But that's not necessary. It's funny, but it's not true. Yeah. Like, you guys did a ton of shit downrange. So maybe if you could like explain to the viewers how exactly you guys are integrated operationally.
Yeah, super easy. So we'll talk about two separate things now. We're talking about the old way. It's the enabler mission for Pararescue and CCT. And then the new way is like we're task organizing on teams and doing Air Force stuff. So the enabler mission, especially for Pararescue, is to remember it doesn't make any sense to give you an extra medic. Well, PJs aren't medics. They're technical rescue specialists. They're there to provide that air-to-ground liaison and specific function for that team, right? So the reason that we started doing the enabler mission wasn't just so teams had an extra medic, right? Like we worked a lot with the Ranger battalions. We worked a lot with Green Berets. The Tier 1 units right now are attaching to the Tier 1 Army and Navy units and have been forever. They all have PJs with them. They're there to provide technical rescue specialty and air-to-ground liaison, right? So they are that link between that 9-line architecture, between the medical assets that are flowing in and out. And we have specific skill sets that we train to that an 18 Delta doesn't have, right? Our guys are trained specifically in mass casualty. We go through their medical training, like 18 Deltas smoke us at a number of different things, like indigenous medicine, clinic medicine, being, you know, all of those other things. We don't focus on that because that's not our lane. You know what I mean? Trauma medicine is trauma medicine. Any 18-year-old that is half intelligent can be a good trauma medic. And I don't want to take anything away from trauma medics, right? Because it's its whole animal, you know?
I'm one, and I'm very good at it, and I teach it.
Right.
But that's because I learned it from an 18 Delta for 10 years.
Right. Yeah. Stop the bleeding, get them breathing, make them leave.
It doesn't take a whole lot. You're right. And I teach civilians, and within an 8-hour class, like they can save somebody's life.
Yeah, totally. And so, but that's not what we're there to do. What we are there to do is when you're walking through what we call high consequence terrain, where if somebody falls, they're going to fall 300 feet to their death. The PJ can get up to the front of the formation, climb through that, make a rope bridge, and get their organization across that to where the enemy isn't expecting that they're coming from.
You guys do mountaineering as well.
We do. We're senior mountaineers. So in the SOCOM architecture, all of our guys graduate as senior mountaineers, which means over 8,000 feet. A pararescueman can take anybody in the SOCOM architecture out. And that's what they graduate as. They're actually, SOCOM recognizes the Pararescue apprentice course as a senior mountaineer course. That's how and by the way, the first thing that PJs do when they graduate, they don't even go to their units. They go to advanced technical rescue courses. So anything with ropes, anything with confined space, anything with somewhere where you could be hurt, lost, or trapped, a pararescueman is there to solve that. Even when you look at things that don't really make a lot of sense, we have, I don't know how many times a troop would be walking across an open field in Afghanistan and they would lose somebody in a well. And pararescuemen would literally make a system and they would pull them up out of the well like that. Like those stories are out there. So that's why PJs are there. And then when you look at mass casualty, like we joked about, you know, hey, I'll be at the CCP. When you have, you know, 40 or 50 people that are jumping into an airfield and there's no kidding, like 3 or 4 casualties, pararescuemen, even out of the schoolhouse, are so adept at mass casualty that is one of the things that we hang our hat on. But like, yeah, listen, trauma medicine is trauma medicine. Try doing trauma medicine with 10 critical patients. Pararescuemen do that like no other, because we train for aircraft crashes and we train for like large transport shit. So when things like that happen, you know, the HBED story that I talked about earlier, the HBIED, that guy had 14 critical casualties and like 9 of them lived. 3 of them were probably unsurvivable. So that's probably what it is. But dude, imagine treating 9 casualties on your own. Like that's our expectation. We have in the Pararescue apprentice course, you are evaluated on mass casualties. So when those teams, when the team started going out, it wasn't that they needed another medic. They were like, hey, listen, if the music does stop and we have, you know, there were houses that would fall in on people, and the PJs would be like, no, I do confined space shit. I know how to do this. Like, we're going to, like, on a ship, like when you do shipboard seizures, the very first person that touched Captain Phillips, I'm the captain now, that guy was a PJ. We've had him on the podcast.
Wow.
Like people don't realize this, but we are there to provide a specific function that, yeah, medicine is part of our bag of tricks, right? But we have these other capabilities that can really help you out. And we can provide that air to ground liaison support that you need. It's great to have a combat controller that can call in the 9 line. But when you look at like, hey, PJ, what do I have? Be like, these 2 dudes need to go out first. I need blood on the way in. They need to bring me 2 more litters. These guys can't go out until the next time. I know where these guys need to go. They need to go to this specific hospital. Like, that's what the PJs provide. And then they're that flyaway asset as well, so that you don't have to take the 18 Delta with you when you go.
Yeah, which we would often at times have to do, right?
You'd have to send them with them, right?
I got to send one of my 2 18 Deltas now with these casualties, because I mean, that's the reality of it. That's definitely that's so interesting, because I had no idea that you guys. I knew that you know, dive Halo, right? But I didn't realize like your scope of that. And what's interesting is I was on 3 ODAs in my almost 8 years team time: a dive team, a mountain team, and a Halo team. And I can tell you, like, as an SF dude, I was not that great at all 3. Like, right, Halo probably better than the other 2. Mountaineering I was horrible at. Like, and I thought mountaineering was infinitely harder than anything in the water or in the sky. For me personally, I got on the side of that mountain and was like, fuck,
terrified, isn't it?
I don't want to be on a mountain team anymore. Send me back to the dive team or send me to a Halo team.
Right.
So the fact that you guys not only... And again, when I'm on a Halo team or a dive team or whatever, or a mountain team, I've got like 11 other dudes. If I don't remember how to do something, I can be like, hey, how the fuck do I tie this knot again? For you guys, like, you literally have to be actually squared away and upkeep all of that knowledge and information, because there's no second PJ, I'm imagining, that's like,
nope,
wait, how do I do this Mascal shit again? It's like, no. You're the guy.
You're the guy.
Like, all the dumb SF guys are like looking at you like,
hey man,
what do we do?
Yeah. And it's a little bit different. Like the team mission, like we do employ as teams. Like the 2 ways to think about it are like enabler. I'm going to put the asset on the ground with them.
Yeah, that's great. Explain that side of it.
Yeah, and then the other side of it is like, no kidding, you just draw a box, and if anything happens inside of this box, aircraft crash, somebody gets trapped, somebody gets hurt, there's a mass casualty, we're going to respond as teams, right? And the teams are right sized, right? And this is AFSOC and PJ specific. So you're gonna make a team. Like, if you're gonna go jump into an area, you're not going to jump into an area, you know, a combat zone with 2 dudes. That doesn't make any sense. That shit does not happen. But like in Alaska, we've got pararescuemen that jumped into the backcountry, 2 guys that jumped into the backcountry of Alaska to save a guy that was in a bear attack, right? Like, we do that as well. So it can go all the, you know, if you're going to jump into a no kidding combat scenario, of course you're not going to jump in with six folks. Now, if you're on helicopters and you're flying into hot HLZs on helicopters that have 50 cals on them, maybe 6 is the right amount of team, because that's what we used to do. You know, I was on, I don't know how many missions in the southern part of Afghanistan, and then again out of Bagram and in Iraq, as a matter of fact, where, you know, it was like 4 Air Force dudes and 4 Rangers. We would fly in on 260s on an 8-man team, and the 4 Rangers all had, you know, fucking, you know, 240s, 249s, and some standoff. And then it was the, you know, me, another PJ, a combat controller, and an officer, and that was our team.
Wow.
So it just depends, right? And we typically do it in smaller teams. We typically do it with a lot more consequence to our actions. We will say, you know, quite frequently to each other, there's nobody coming to save us. Like, you call us to come save you. Like, if you go into an event, and this is Special Reconnaissance, TAC P, Combat Controller, when that music stops, there's really nobody else. It's like, that's it. Like, if you call my PJ team in to save you, you know, we kind of look at each other. We're like, okay, well, who are we calling? Nobody. unless there's a team that's sleeping, that's on, you know, the other shift, there ain't anybody coming to save us. We got to figure this one out. So, you know, those are kind of like the two different mission sets. The enabler mission, you know, guys have done a great job. There's tier 1 guys that are doing it right now and have been for years, decades at this point. The larger Air Force, especially on the AFSOC side, is starting again, just like, you know, GWAT's over. We're not going, you know, 3K walk-ons to a mud hut somewhere to get into a gunfight. Yeah. That's not what everybody's doing now. You know, we're starting to look at Air Force centric problems, suppression of enemy air defenses, finding those airfields that we can establish an airhead for, like hub and spoke is what they're calling it, right? Find a space, flow everybody into that space, and then take control of the entire area. Those are more of the things that the Air Force teams are focused on. So you have PJs, combat controllers, special reconnaissance, TAC-P, and the officer counterparts making up those teams to get after global strike, recovery, surgery, all these other things.
That's actually what I was going to lead into next, is operationally what you see the units doing going forward, because for us it's the same thing, man. Like everything is sort of being rescoped. Out in first group, we became the siege SOTA for Taiwan. So sure. We were obviously heavily invested in, like, what does that conflict look like? Obviously not the same as the global war on terror, right? It's right. Any metric. So yeah, it might be cool to talk about, like, you got a little bit in there. And Trent, I want to get your take on this as an SR guy, because to me, when we talked about our unit basically being the first ones into North Korea, that to me really was more of like an Air Force SR type of mission of like special reconnaissance, getting in ahead of time, going forward, prepping the battlefield, getting things ready for a larger conventional force, which, like, SR is one of our 18 different core missions in special forces, but like we got like one dude in the company who actually knows how to do it. Usually everybody else sort of just pretends like we know how to do it. So yeah, I mean, that's the reality, right? Where do you see going forward? Because again, in these first world conflicts, that seems like that's going to be a potential.
Yeah, that's the whole reason that we kind of stepped away from the special operations weather thing into SR is the Pentagon was like, hey guys, like the next phase of wherever we're going is a lot different than GWAT, right? And what we did in GWAT was all fine and well, and you know, we did what we did, and we managed to hang on to our career field. But like moving forward, like there's so many additional factors that we have to worry about, right? Like we see it online all the time. You got drones, you got electronic stuff, you got, you know, every electronic emission out there. You need to know what it is, where it's coming from, how to defeat it, how to, you know, spoof it, how to do all these other things. But you still also have to have all of your low tech you know, skill sets in order to, you know, move around in that environment, know where you're going, and to create that airhead, to create that space where we can get additional forces in there. And that's really what it's all about. And yeah, there's a lot of different units in the military that do similar things or that type of thing. But especially solving those Air Force centric problems to think 3-dimensionally, you know, like space to mud, you know, that's the kind of things that we're trying to get after. And you know, people are like, oh, like you guys are like sniper guys and all this other stuff. I'm like, yeah, the kinetic stuff is cool, but the really cool stuff is you know, certain attachments to your SWAS, your drones that you can put on there to pick up different things, working out these like HF communication problems and trying to stay, you know, to how do we communicate without the enemy that has similar capabilities as us being able to pick up those transmissions. You know, how do we know where we are on planet Earth and all these other things as we open up that airhead, take out their capabilities so that we can get a space, a foothold to get our air assets in there and do what we do.
Yeah, and you know, I'm glad you mentioned communication there at the end, because I was a Special Forces communication sergeant, and that was part of my role out in Oki, was starting to try to work on that denied communications piece, right? Where we kind of all take for granted the fact that in, you know, Afghanistan, I can just go out there and take a 117 Gulf radio and blast 20 watts into the air, SATCOM, and just good to go. Whereas, like, I can't go into Taiwan and like blast 20 watts of radio into the air, because I'm going to get RFDF'd and I'm going to be killed in fucking
you can
2 minutes.
If you want to die, you know, and if you really extrapolate this out, we get the question all the time, and it's hilarious. Like, well, in the next gen fight, what is SR going to do? But like, how about if somebody goes down behind enemy lines and we don't want anybody to know that the PJ team is going to go in and rescue that dude? Like, you have to defeat those systems on the way in and not DF your position and find out if you do need help, how are you even going to call? What are you going to do? Yeah. Like those questions. have really exquisite answers. And people, just because they're short-sighted, they're like, well, what would a PJ do on that sort of thing? A ton of shit. I can tell you a million things. I can get, just the example from earlier. If they don't think that you can get across the terrain and they're not defending that terrain, that might be your in. And oh, by the way, if there's an electronic sort of detection device in that area, then the SR guy is able to go ahead and defeat that in a way that it makes it look like we were never there. And then, oh, by the way, the combat controller on the back end can actually get an aircraft to defeat that system to get in and then get us out. And it's not a suicide mission, us going into this thing. So, the people that poo-poo oh, well, what's the Air Force going to do? And like, what Air Force problems? Bro, more than you know. Yeah.
I get a little frustrated when I hear people talk about this too, of like, oh, well, the next conflict's going to be all technology and all this. And I'm like, really?
Is it?
Because I'm watching.
Is it?
I'm watching the war in Ukraine, and you know what I see?
Trench warfare.
Technology is so fucking good that we're back to fucking World War I, tank
right.
and trench, and yes, drone warfare.
Yeah.
But how are you countering those drones, right? How,
right.
like, it does matter. It's not just like, oh, robots are going to fight the war. That's not what we're fucking seeing.
No. Nope.
And two massive first world nations going to war with each other. So we do kind of have an example of what this may look like going forward. And it's not just as simple as like, oh, it's just like, HIMARS rockets and drones, and that's the way the conflict's going to be. Not really, in my opinion. Last thing I want to talk about. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's funny sitting in some of these rooms like 6 years ago, right? And when they were like, "Oh, we need to train on SWAS," and I'm like, "We also need to train on counter SWAS." And that's like the door opening in people's minds. They're like, "Oh shit!" Like, and then like you see that the flood of like the possibilities enter their brain, and you're like, "Yeah, it's gonna get gnarly, guys." Like, there's apply that to every other situation that we're talking about.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Last thing I wanted to talk about. We're getting near about an hour. If you guys can talk on it, because I don't know how well you're queued in, but I get asked this all the time, and I'm literally clueless. And that is your guys' tier 1 side of the house. You guys have tier 1 PJs.
We do.
I'm not exactly how your tier 1 works at all. It's not like Delta Force, so I know exactly how I know what OTC is. I know what the qualification course. I know every detail of that because I've got 15 buddies who are over there. But for the Air Force side of the class, I am clueless, and I know a lot of my viewers are super interested in that.
Yeah, we can talk in generalities, right? So we're not.
That's fine.
There's an assessment and selection. I haven't gone to the assessment and selection. I've got 2 deployments where I supported them on task force rotation. So I've seen, behind the wall, so to speak, a bunch of good friends that work there. We just typically don't talk about it because we were never part of the unit. But, basic stuff, you have to be a vetted pararescue combat controller, TAC-P, SR dude before you can assess and select to go up there. They have an OTC as well. It's modeled off the other tier ones units. If you know what Delta does for their OTC, the Air Force does a very, very similar thing. It's similar in time. It's similar in skill sets. It's similar in everything because that unit is there to support the Army and the Navy tier 1 units. Now, they do have an exquisite suite of employment and other, things. They've got a comm shop. They have another level, just like Delta has a very specific compartmentalized other team that does other specific
100%.
Functions. So does the Air Force.
I got the emails to get recruited to their, not be a Delta operator, but support Delta operators, your whole career. Yep.
So same stuff. Like the selection is absolutely hard. They're looking for, a very specific personality type to go up there. They're on par with their Army tier 1 units. A lot of the very famous pararescue stories or a lot of the recent, I have a friend with 2 silver stars. I have a friend with a couple combat jump missions. Very funny story about that. I won't say his name, but my boy looked at me and he was like, man, because we were talking about how important free fall is and how often you need to do it. He's like, let me tell you a story. I was with the Army on this rotation. I got a combat free fall jump out of it. You know when the next time I jumped was? A year later. And you know what that was? Another combat free fall jump with the same Army team. Because at one point, everybody was just jumping in to go do shit, right? Yeah. So, man, that unit is full of absolute professionals. DJ Shipley was dead on. Those guys focused, on the same food groups that their tier 1 counterparts do, along with leveraging, cutting edge technologies, test and evaluation as part of their unclassed mission set. Out in North Carolina. I know the unclassed mission name. I won't put it out there because people get all wonky about it, but We do, there is that there, like people will go there and you can completely operate on one of those teams forever. Like you can go there and you can never leave. It's just like the Army and the Navy Tier 1 units, but there's an extensive vetting process. The assessment selection is absolutely no joke. We've had the guy that runs it on, his name's Mr. Trey Free. If anybody's interested in figuring out how it is to get there, again, you have to be active duty. Typically when candidates are hitting us up and be like, well, I want to do this, be like, hey bro, that is the definition of cart before the horse. Like if you want to go there, okay, tight.
I get that a lot too about Delta Force.
Yeah, man. Like I got it.
Slow down, buddy.
Yeah, you can go take the long walk if you want, but let's have this conversation in 4 years where you're not a shitbag E3 and you're getting to the end of that. You have to be within a year of your first assignment, you have to be within a year of your contract expiring to even throw your name in the hat, for GSO. But for us, yeah, you can get there. Yes, you can. It's an awesome mission set. Yes, it's a very specific and very exquisite set of skills and set of technologies that you'll leverage to do those mission sets. You'll get to work with the best in the world. And there's even, ladders that you can climb inside of the organization to go do even cooler secret squirrel stuff. But that's not the point, man. The point is it exists. They're there for test and evaluation. It's an awesome organization. And yes, we do have it. Trent, anything in there?
Some of my very favorite people in the world are working on that side of the fence. Killers. And they're doing fantastic things.
Yeah. Quick question to that. Is it, you guys recruit from all of the SPECWAR MOSs. Is it like kind of like for us with Delta Force, like they'll take Rangers. It's mainly Rangers and Green Berets, right? There's a few here and there offsets.
It's
you guys,
PJs.
I'm assuming, don't.
No,
it's
PJs,
just from the Corps.
You have to be.
Do you become like in Delta, right? You could be an 18 Charlie or whatever. You'd be Ranger Bat dude. You become you're a Delta Force operator. You're all trained in the same skill set, not the exact same, right? But if you're let's say Trent and you both go to selection, one of you's a PJ, one of you's SR. Are you trained in like a new skill set task, or are you basically kind of fitting in your actual skill set you already have? Is that this is a question kind of makes sense?
Being a PJ, and I don't want to take anything away from my PJ brothers on the Air Force, the regular Air Force side of the house, AFSOC, ACC, whatever, wherever you work, man, PJs are PJs. They're awesome. They're the gold standard, in my opinion, for special operations, personnel recovery. They are the answer, right? When you go to the 2-4, they take you from, Jedi to Jedi Master. They take you from, grade school to college level PhD, whatever. You're still providing that capability. That's why it's not like going to Delta where you were a Ranger before and now you're an assaulter forever, or you're, a support medic forever. We don't have those specific tracks. They take a good PJ, a PJ that's vetted, that passes OTC, that does all these things from green team on up. And then they put that PJ with the world's best operators and they ask them to solve even harder problems, but they do it as a PJ.
Okay, that makes sense.
There is some crossover as those ladders climb into some of the other stuff.
Yeah.
All right, and then last thing I want to do is just advice that you might give the young dudes that are watching my channel on potentially how to go about. We're not going to get into like how to train or how to do all these things, but like just advice on what you think on determining if you want to decide to have the Air Force SPECWAR as the route you want to go as comparatively to Green Berets or Rangers. And what I mean by this question is like when people ask me, like if you're 18 years old and you want to go soft, I tell them, go be a fucking Ranger. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't try to go be a Green Beret. Like if you want to be a Green Beret, be 25 years old, right? Have some life experience. What's your guys' advice for dudes that may want to try to go the Air Force SPECWAR side of the house?
I'll let you go, Trek.
Yeah. So bottom line, like there's not really anything in the special operations side that I would say is a bad job, but the Rangers probably are. Like when you're 18 years old and you think of what special operations is, the Rangers are going to fill that void better than the rest of them because it's just a lack of understanding and education of what special operations actually does. But at the end of the day, if you feel the itch, if you feel like I don't want to get woo woo about it, but like if you feel that calling, right? If you watch a video, if you see something, or if you get like a briefing and you're like, man, I really want to do that, then do it. Like stop. You don't need to ask 8 million questions. You don't need to watch every single one of our videos. I would like you to, right? Like if you're additional education and all this other stuff, but man, if you're like, I still haven't made up my mind after 3 years of looking at all this stuff, then don't do it. But if you feel the need, if you have the itch and you feel like, that's something that you want to do, that you almost need to do, then stop questioning yourself and just push the button and go.
Yeah. And for me, it's like I always try to bring people down to like, because I'm a tactical guy, man. Like I'm not a strategic, level thinker. That's why I'm friends with Trent, because he's better at it than I am. You know what I mean? For me at the tactical level, you got to decide if you want to be in the Air Force or not. It doesn't matter, like
Okay.
this Green Beret, Ranger, SEAL, PJ discussion of like, do you want to be in the Air Force or not? Because statistically, you're going to fail. And statistically, you're
Right.
not going to become a Green Beret. Statistically, you're not going to become a SEAL. Do you want to be in the Navy? Like, that's where you got to start. Like, what service do you want to be in? Once you get, like, for Trent, do you have a calling to service? Okay, cool. Do you have a calling to special operations? All right. Now, what do you want to do? Do you want to be in the Air Force? And you have to answer that question before you can be like, I want to be a PJ. You can want to be a PJ all you want, right? You could be like, I love personnel recovery, that others may live. I want to wear the angel. I want to get the tattoos. I want to do all this stuff. Tight. Do you want to be in the Air Force? Because if you don't make it as a PJ and you hate your life in the Air Force, none of it's going to work out for you. So even though you might want to be a PJ later in life, maybe that's not the right thing because you don't want to be in the Air Force. If you don't want to be in the Army, but you really want to be a Green Beret, that doesn't, those two things are not mutually exclusive, but they're really, really close. You know what I mean? So for advice for us, man, like, and then you have to know what the jobs are. That's like, once you figure out, okay, I want to be in there, people are like, well, I don't know if I want to be a combat controller or a pararescueman. How? Those jobs couldn't be any different. Like the personalities are different. The day-to-day is different. When people are like, oh, I don't know if I want to be an SR guy or a combat controller, the first thing I tell them is like, well, you don't know anything about the two jobs then. You've gotten bad information, and we need to have a conversation where you actually understand what those dudes do. So you really have to, and it seems like, it seems like I'm condescending. Condescending means talking down to someone, Trent, you idiot.
Oh, now I know.
But it's one of those things where it's like you have to go step by step with this thing. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to be a PJ and it's going to be great, and I'm gonna make it through selection, and I'm coming back with my shield or on it, blah blah blah. I get it, man. But if you don't want to be in the Air Force, then you're going to hate your life being a PJ anyway. If you don't want to be in the Army, it doesn't. I had a very good dude. We actually made him an honorary PJ. He was at CAG for like 18 deployments for like 22 years as a sergeant major that taught at the Pararescue schoolhouse as a civilian. Dude is legit. He's awesome. And he used to tell the students all the time, like during story time, he would look at him and he'd go, hey, man, yeah, it was cool. Working in North Carolina for 20 years or 25 years and getting 18 deployments out of it. It was badass, man. It was awesome. Guess what? I was still in the Army. I still had to do CBTs. I still had to take sharp training. Every once in a while, somebody would get pissed off and we'd have to shave our beards and put a uniform on and do all sorts of stuff. Like, if you don't want to deal with that in the Army, then it doesn't matter if you want to be a Green Beret or not, right? You got to answer those questions and then know the jobs. Know what a Green Beret really does in today's context. Know what they do today. I tell people that want to be a PJ, I hope you're ready to sit, like come sit and relax. It's a joke, but it's not a joke. Sometimes you'll have guys that go on deployments and literally sit alert the entire time and don't go on a mission. It just is what it is. That's what's supposed to happen. You're not supposed to respond to an emergency every time that you clock in for work. It's not how it's supposed to work, right? Like, people die and then you have to go get them. That's not supposed to happen all the time. So, as long as people understand and go into that clear-eyed and they can make that good decision, my advice is the same as Trent's. Quit fucking half-stepping and go do it. You don't need to know every single, you don't need to, well, what's the day-to-day like? Well, what's it going to be? What's the impact on my family? What's the pay scale? What am I going to go to sniper school? Bro, shut up. You're wasting my time. You're wasting your time. You're wasting everybody's time. Either go do it or stop.
Yeah, I love that, guys. I tell people the exact same thing. It's like, I tell people, like, what is your purpose? And this goes into like what Trent said. And like, is this, you have this deep desired internal, like, purpose that you could feel it's a calling. That's what I had. Cause I tell dudes, if you want to do this because like you want to be a Green Beret because you're going to go shoot people in the face and like be a badass, like don't waste your fucking time because like when it's 34 degrees outside and it's pissing rain and you're sitting on your rucksack and it's day 3 of land nav at SFAS, like, cool guy shit is not going to get you through that, right? Exactly, or, like when you're fucking tying knots under the fucking pool and you're about to black out, like, for the 10th time of the day, the cool guy shit's going to be like, no, I'm good, right? Yeah. So I feel the same way. And also, to caveat what you guys said, like, when me, you, Trent, when, like, all of us went through these qualification courses, like, there was no fucking YouTube channel that had, like, all the fucking guide to success. Like, nobody fucking knew what was going on. All you had was, like, rumors from, like, the classes ahead of you about, like, maybe what the course was like.
Right.
So, like, we didn't have access to any of this fucking information.
Well,
right?
and then you didn't even know what you were getting into. I didn't know GWAT.
Exactly,
I didn't, dude.
yeah.
And then you show up at, I show up to Iraq in 2008 or 2009. Whenever I show up to Iraq, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? This is what this job like, and it changes like that stuff that good on you. But man, that cool guy stuff or thinking that you're gonna do one thing or whatever, like that ain't gonna do it, homie. Like just don't waste your time. But yeah.
And I tell people this, man, all the time. I did a whole video on how not all fucking Green Berets are war heroes, and that's the reality of like,
what?
there is a shit. Yeah,
Right.
I know. I don't want to, Santa Claus isn't real, right? Like
every PJ gets a silver
Tim Kennedy
star.
exists, right? Get it? Like not everybody's Tim Kennedy, but sorry.
Which is so
taste,
tragic.
Poor taste on that. But my point is like you're saying, Aaron, like, yeah, like there's plenty of Green Berets that go to first group and didn't make a Afghanistan rotation, like worked in Japan their whole career, never went to combat. Like that's a normal thing. So you got to want to have that, like that purpose, that desire for something greater. Like that Trent talked about. That's what I think. Because if you don't, you're not going to make it through 2.5, 3 years of fucking getting your dick kicked in every day. It's just not gonna happen.
And you'll be one of those guys that punches after their first assignment. If you have this built up in your head that you're going to go kick doors in and shoot people in the face, man, you go on one FID deployment to Kenya, and you kind of spend like 6 months there hanging out with dudes, and then you come back and that was it. Like, what are you going to do now? Like, where's your why now? Like, you better have something better than what your expectation of it is from watching Funker 350 videos from Afghanistan in 2012. You know what I mean? Like, it just is what it is. It's hard to communicate.
Dude, I've told this story before, but one of my favorite times getting people to quit is I went and had lunch with some of my trainees when I was an instructor way back in the day. And they were kind of asking me about the job and all this other stuff. I'm like, man, nobody knows who we are. Nobody's going to know what you do downrange. Like at that point, like if they write books, they're going to say that you were some random Army guy if they even remember that you were there. They have no idea that you were an Air Force guy.
Nope.
You can't walk into a bar and be like, I'm a special operations weather guy and get anything out of that.
Right.
And I'm like,
they'll actually ask you to leave the bar. They'll be like, unless it's a gay bar, they're like, hey, get this guy shots.
If you can't go do your job and be satisfied with the things that you're doing and come home and be a normal person, like this isn't for you. And like the next morning, like 3 or 4 of those dudes quit. And I was just like, that's the reality though.
And it's true. Yeah. And even on the PJ side of that, like we get more pump, than everybody, right? Like everybody really does pretty much know who a PJ is. Like there's this canonization and lionization of that.
Yeah. You guys are the Green Beret Navy SEAL side of the Air Force.
Yeah. But even then, like you didn't know that the first guy to touch Captain Phillips was a fucking PJ. Like you're going to do things in the shadow. There's a ton of stories. I have close friends of mine that I'm like, oh my God, that was a fucking movie. How did you do? Guys running across an open field to get a dude that was already shot. He stopped him from dying. And then when he ran across the field with the guy on his shoulder, they were shooting so accurately that they hit his casualty. He got injured from that. He saved him again. And then he got him back to higher level of care. That story is a fucking movie and nobody knows about it. That was
never heard it.
Well, yeah. And it didn't even get put, it didn't even get put out in Stars and Stripes. And PJs have that history behind it. Like, I'm sorry, man. People, you're not gonna know. They're not gonna know who you are. You're gonna do an entire career of getting in firefights and people like the HKIA dudes, pararescue men in small teams like 2 and 3 were leaving the gate at HKIA to go do hostage rescues, and the Air Force told them they weren't going to give them awards for valor because quote that's their job quote.
Yeah, okay. And that's and that's how it is for all of us across the board, right?
And you better be ready for it. Like you better be able to deal with that.
And nobody cares, right? When you talk about you're just doing your job and the Valor Award thing, like I have multiple Valor and Combat Awards, and that's the reality is like I barely got those being in a near ambush from fucking 5 meters away, right? Because it was just kind of like, hey man, you're an SF guy, you're just doing your job. There's a lot. Don't expect, like you said, like glorification or gratification if it's not internal to you and your boys, right? For me, it was all about like the team.
Yeah.
It needs to be about the team. Because what I always say when I talk to people is like, you're not the main character of the story when you're in special operations. Like everything is the team. The ODA is everything. And like how everything I do to better myself is so that I can become a better asset to the dudes to my left and right. Because if I'm a liability, I'm going to get my buddies fucking killed. So if you don't have like the internal desire to be the fucking best and outwork everybody because you want to be the best possible asset to your team or your unit, don't even fucking come our way because like, you're not going to be any value to me. That's how I feel about it.
Hell yeah. It's a hell of a way to end, brother.
Yep. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks to the guys for coming on. This has been awesome. They'll probably have it over on your channel. It'll be on my channel as well. Don't forget, I mean, God, Aaron's everywhere, right? Aaron Loves America, One's Ready Podcast, War Room. Trent, I don't know if you've got extra shit too. You guys are all over the place. We'll make sure we get the links in the description to Aaron's 10 different fucking platforms. And thanks again, guys. We'll catch you guys in the next one.
Thanks, y'all. Nate,
Love
crush
y'all.
it.